It's showtime.
People should not be afraid of their governments. Governments should be afraid of their people.
You know, the right to bear arms is because that's the last form of defense against tyranny.
Washington is fundamentally corrupt. There are more words in the IRS code than there are in the Bible.
Made in America, heard round the world. You're listening to Blunt Force Truth. I'm Chuck Woolery, along with my co-host, Mark Young. Normally we have a guest, but today Mark is my guest and I'm his guest.
Well, these things happen sometimes. Today,
well, you know, it happens, whatever.
But today, the guest in America today will be Robert Mueller, because the redacted Mueller report will be hitting the news today.
The color-coded redacted. You know what? Everybody's breathlessly waiting on this. I'm not sure that's true. This sounds like media hyperbole. I think the media is breathlessly waiting. I think Washington's breathlessly waiting. I don't think America's breathlessly waiting on any of this.
Now, you're right. This is color-coded. Do you remember years ago when I brought the Rainbow Study Bible out that had all the 12 different color codes? This is like the Rainbow Study Bible, and about as thick, too.
That's right. Yeah, about as thick. Well, all
right. So first off, the Democrats are
They're using bold print so that the Congress can actually read it.
The Democrats,
they don't read anything. You ever notice that?
They don't read anything.
Congress doesn't read anything. You hire these congressmen, these senators, they hired, giant staffs to read everything for them and tell them what it means, which tells you the level of integrity and the level of intellect that our elected politicians have.
Right. And then they get on camera and say, I say, boy.
This is what I believe. Mm-hmm. No idea. They've got a clue.
Why is there so many people in Congress that sound like Leghorn Foghorn?
Well, of course, it kind of goes back to the old South when they used to sound like that. I don't think so many of them do now.
They do in Congress.
I know. Yeah, I know.
That's right. I said that, boy. But anyways.
I think they're comical.
So at any rate.
Passing laws and they're not so comical. What?
So at any rate, the Democrats want this sent out. They want it unredacted.
Well, I mean, look, the Democrats would complain if it were unredacted, and then they would complain about commas. They're just looking for something, anything they can wrap their heads around and try to get rid of Trump. That's all this is about.
I want people to understand what's being redacted is the names of individuals who have not been indicted.
Right.
Which makes sense. Let's not ruin any more lives than we've already ruined.
Exactly.
That seems like a terrible idea. They're redacting anything which would give up how our country collects intel, because we should give up all of our intel secrets.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
I mean, so this is all that's being redacted in this stuff.
Well, I'll tell you one thing that's going to be given up, or it's already been given up. And that is the FBI, along with the intel community, used Russian people who worked for them in order to try to implant them in the Trump campaign. And it didn't work, but they tried their best to implant Russian operatives who worked for the FBI in the Trump campaign. I mean, why would you do that without telling Trump what's going on? Unless you're trying to get rid of him, obviously.
This goes right back to something that you say on this show all the time, and that is, if you want to know what a Democrat is doing, just look at what they're accusing the other side of.
Exactly.
There was Russian collusion, but the Russian collusion was by them.
I know.
This goes back to Bernie Sanders as an example. Bernie says, millionaires don't pay enough taxes, except me. I paid what was due. I paid 26%. That's all I owed.
We've heard this this is cover.
It's do as I say, not as I do.
Billionaires, and they all complain about it. I only paid as much as my secretary.
Right. But it's the typical story of this diversion of hiding in plain sight. If I want to commit Russian collusion, I'm going to accuse the president of Russian collusion, so no one pays any attention to the real Russian collusion.
And when you have a compliant media to go along with you, which is a very strong voice, it'll work for a while. This is literally coming unraveled. The only problem is, the only place it's unraveling right now is on Fox News, which, when you look at it compared to the mainstream media, what we consider the mainstream media, Fox News is just a little tiny segment. I mean, 9%, and they want to squash it. They are trying to get rid of every semi-conservative, every voice they possibly can that is in opposition to them. They will squash anybody that gets in their way. We talked about Omar on the last show. That's one of the reasons you can't criticize her, because she's a Muslim. You can't criticize her because she's a black Muslim. It has nothing to do with her words. It has to do with her. It's all identity politics, and it just goes on and on and on. And
the left is out to get rid of the First Amendment. Well, there's some other amendments they want to get rid of too, but they want the First Amendment gone. Mm-hmm. Think about what they're doing, Chuck. We're now at the point where you don't have the right to disagree.
Mark, the thing that's remarkable to me, and I know I go down this road all the time, and everybody's probably tired of it, but I'm going to go down it again. This has been going on for over at least 100 years. This whole thing with our Constitution, with our Bill of Rights, with the Supreme Court trying to stack it. I mean, this has been going on since Woodrow Wilson. They have constantly had our Constitution under assault by the left. It's always been there. They don't like the founding of this country. They because they owned slaves or whatever reason, or because they were all white. I mean, it one excuse after another, and that's how they play their game. They literally use freedom to attack freedom.
They want the First Amendment gone.
Using freedom to attack freedom.
Right. Now,
one thing that we have is the First Amendment that I guarantee you every country and the population of every country in the world would like to have that First Amendment, where you can say what you want to say about government. And political correctness, which came out of the Frankfurt School in Germany in the 30s, literally denies you that. And it's you can't speak any opposition against government. And Europe has literally embraced that whole idea. And they're trying to push it off on us, which is why all these lefties want us to be like Europe. That's all they talk about. Well, in Europe they do this, and in Germany they do this, and Britain they do this. And we are not those people, and we don't want to be those people. We have the First Amendment.
Citizens around the world are envious of our First Amendment rights. So a friend of mine, who is a friend of yours also, makes frequent trips to Cuba.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes, I know.
You know who we're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
So he's made friends in Cuba.
Yeah.
His friends in Cuba, let's say they're in a restaurant,
mm-hmm.
and he will tell me that they will say, shh, don't say anything negative about the government, because people could be listening.
They are listening.
Because you will get swept up right in the street and you will never be seen again.
Mm-hmm.
This is what socialism looks like.
This is Michael Moore's utopia.
Yeah, this is what socialism looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Socialism looks like France, which should change its name to Francistan at this point.
Well, it's fascinating geopolitically what's gone on in Europe, because of all the refugees that have just poured in because of the EU, have poured into Sweden, to France, to Germany. The culture is literally being changed. It truly is an invasion, something they could never accomplish by starting a war with them. So they just did it a different way. And this is exactly what's going on here. Our culture will never be the same once they overturn it, open up all the borders, do what they're trying to do. And they're doing it successfully. They're being successful. They were certainly successful in Europe, and they're successful here.
So we've got this Mueller report coming out, which is going to be nothing.
Well, here's the deal, and I think Jerry Nadler gave this away in a Jake Tapper interview, believe it or not, and that is, there's no collusion. They know there's no collusion, everything else, but there's that possibility, that string of possibility of obstruction, and of course, by firing James Comey, it certainly wasn't obstruction, but they'll hang on that. They will take this obstruction thing as far as they possibly can, and they'll pound that drum forever.
So I have a question for you.
There's no proof of it.
So my question is, let's assume for a minute there's obstruction. How do you obstruct the investigation of a non-existent crime?
Well, on top of that, he didn't obstruct it in any way.
I know, but let's assume for a minute that he took measures to stop this investigation, which was a joke. I wouldn't blame him if he was trying to stop wasting money on the investigation. But how do you obstruct an investigation over something that never happened?
It's true, and yet at the same time, you got to look at the populace. That is the populace in Senate and in Congress on both sides, Republican and Democrat. We have to let Mueller do this. You can't touch Mueller. Mueller is beyond reproach. Everybody said it, Republican and Democrat, and Trump never did. He criticized him, but he certainly never obstructed him in any way. But
22 months.
But the thing is, the left always considers criticism as obstruction.
No, I don't think most people understand that the Mueller investigation itself was probably illegally founded.
A lot of people don't understand that, and they may never, hopefully, if we ever get to the bottom of this. And on top of that, I have a feeling that even if these people went to jail, they still wouldn't accept the fact that it was illegal.
So there never should have been a Mueller investigation.
That's the frustrating part about it.
And what we've been looking at here is we have been looking at...
Well, wait a minute. Let's identify what the Mueller investigation is. The Mueller investigation was an intelligence investigation.
Mm-hmm. To investigate the Russians interfering in our election.
Which we know that they did. They try every cycle. I mean, the Chinese do it. They all do it.
And we do it.
Well, Barack Obama did it in Israel. My gosh, he visibly did it there.
Right.
But the point is, they used Donald Trump as a elected president by the people who they never accepted nor never liked, and they still don't. And so they're using him as a crudgel for this investigation, trying to prove that Russia was a puppet of Putin, which is insane. He committed treason. I mean, Brennan said he committed treason. So they have this whole false narrative set up. The Republicans supported them in it, and everybody believes it. It's going to be very difficult, no matter what proof you have, to convince these people who have been convinced for 2.5 years that this is not an illegitimate or a legitimate investigation, because it wasn't.
40% of the country still thinks that the president was involved with Russia.
Yeah, for a good reason. That's all they've been told for 2.5 years. It's all they've heard from Washington Post, New York Times. I mean, they've also been told that the economy is no good, that only the rich are benefiting. Well, it's incredible what people will believe in, even if they see it with their own eyes.
Well, it gets back to, are you going to believe me or are you going to believe your own lying eyes?
Exactly right. Unfortunately, because of peer pressure, because of a constant drumming of fake news, if you want to call it that, they have nowhere to go. They have nothing to. It's all emotion. It's all just passion and emotion. It has nothing to do with facts. Facts are boring. Passion, emotion is more interesting. And so they will just, create, the autocrats will just beat you to death and make you serve them, whether you like it or not. And they'll use passion and emotion to do it. So I'm going to use this as an example. They will make you servants of the government, which is really what they want to do, instead of the government serving us. And what they lean into is groupthink. Oh my gosh! Listen. This last Sunday, and I do this to myself every week so that we can comment. Sometimes I watch Face the Nation. I watch Chris Wallace. I watch all the shows. Okay,
yes. Deface the Nation.
It is amazing. They literally have the same script. I mean, they talk to the same people. They have the same script. They're all excited about Pete Buttigieg or whatever his name is from Indiana running for president.
South Bend, yeah.
Oh my God, just anybody that can put two words together. Anyway, it goes on. It never stops.
So
and it won't stop in the future.
I'm going to give you this as an example. There was a person who was beaten up on a bridge here in the Detroit area, the Belle Isle. And while this man beat this woman, about 30 bystanders stood around in a circle and watched this beating, and no one interfered.
And probably used their cameras to take pictures, I'm just guessing.
Oh, absolutely. But here's the reason. The reason no one interfered is because of groupthink. Because the group thinks what happens to people is they assume that the crowd knows something that I don't know. So because no one in the crowd is interfering in this beating, I won't interfere either, because the rest of the group's probably smarter than me, and they probably know something I don't know. This is what's happening. Well, there must be, I'm hearing so many people tell me that the president was involved in Russia. I'm not close to the situation. I'm hearing this from CNN, MSNBC. These people have better contacts than I have. These people have more knowledge than I have. These people have, unnamed sources all over the White House that are giving them information. They've got to be smarter than me on this subject. No, they're not smarter than you.
And you got the head of the FBI, you got the head of the CIA, you got the head of the NSA, you got a head of, please. And
if you go to CNN and MSNBC, I like to refer to them as MS-13 NBC. They're claiming, this is what they say, the bar to indict the president was extremely high, and Mueller could not uncover sufficient evidence to reach that bar. When you and I both know, the report says there was zero evidence. It does not say insufficient.
Our friend Mark Levin, who I don't know, I've never met him, but he's a friend, brought this out long before anybody talked about it, that you couldn't indict a sitting president. And no one paid any attention to it. And finally, they all went back to the DOJ, which was, had this provision in it from the 70s. And, this guy's, Mark Levin's a very smart guy. He knows the law. He's been in government. He knows how it works. And so he brought this to everyone's attention who wasn't paying attention. And then all of a sudden they caught on and realized you can't indict a sitting president. So if you can't indict him, all you can do is accuse him. And if accusing is enough, then that's what we'll do. We'll just accuse, because we just can't indict him.
Now, Nancy Pelosi says that trying to...
You think they'll be interested in indicting him after he's out of office?
Well, no, because they won't.
No.
He's out of power now.
Exactly.
Because they don't care about justice. Not that he's done anything wrong. But Nancy Pelosi says that impeaching the president would be a distraction for the country. Now, what Nancy Pelosi is really saying is impeaching the president would be a disaster to the Democratic Party.
Right. Which is already a disaster, I think.
But that was already proven with Clinton and the Republicans.
Right.
But AOC, Waters, Ilham Omar, Rashid, they're all contradicting her, saying they are going to impeach. Al Green.
What's the other? Bobby Rush?
Al Green is insane.
So is Bobby Rush. Bobby Rush is just gone.
But I guess my point here is, do you think that impeachment is off the table now?
If Pelosi is in charge, probably, because she knows the damage that it will do. Whether you believe it or not, I think the president's approval ratings are much higher than are being reported by the media.
Well, Rasmussen has them at 53%.
I think he's much higher than that. I really do, and I think Rasmussen is probably right as they can be, but I think it's much higher. The Democrats are just fighting an uphill battle. They can't compete with the economy, so no matter what's happening that's good or what Trump has done that's good, they have to criticize it. They have to, pummel it, and people know the difference. I mean, they basically, it gets back to what you and I said at the opening of the show. Don't believe your eyes, believe what we're telling you. People are not that stupid, and Democrats depend on them being just ignorant and stupid. and all those segments of the population are, and whatever they are, you make up your own mind. But I don't think the vast majority of American people are stupid.
Well, think of this.
I don't think they're going to vote against their own, pocketbooks.
There is no Russian collusion. Unemployment is at a historic low. Unemployment for blacks, Hispanics, women, historic low.
Mm-hmm.
The gross domestic product, our GDP, what is in excess of what Barack Obama said could ever happen again in history unless you had a magic wand.
The new normal for the Democrats. They kept saying this is a new normal. Don't get used to being prosperous. It's a new normal not to be.
North Korea is not firing rockets over Japan.
Right.
We now have the NATO countries actually paying and contributing to the cost of their defense. We have,
of course, Democrats think that's horrible.
We have the right to try law, where people can now get medical care if they're terminal and use experimental medicine without having to get government approval.
Mm-hmm.
We have the president that is fighting to try to protect our borders. We have a better deal, a better trade deal now with Canada. We have a better trade deal with Mexico.
It still hasn't gone through Congress.
We have China coming to the table on trade deals.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, so forget that you don't like the way he uses Twitter. Forget the
here's
fact.
What you hear about the China trade deal. Here's the left's approach to the China trade deal. Let's go to the middle of the country to all the farmers and find out how they're being hurt, and then let's talk about it. And the farmers are saying, yeah, we're being hurt right now with the trade deal, the way it's going, but we're looking forward to having a new one which will prosper much more. But, it makes no difference. They try to paint everything in a negative light to make you as unhappy as possible, and I just don't listen to them. I don't listen to them.
We have manufacturing jobs that have come back to America that Barack Obama said were gone forever.
Yeah.
That have returned.
So why did Bernie Sanders have the background of Bethlehem Steel in Pennsylvania to back up his town hall at Fox? Why? Why did he pick Bethlehem Steel, who probably created more steel? And I'm going to tell you something. It's very interesting, folks, if you don't know this. After the Second World War, we had devastated Japan. We devastated Europe, and they deserved it. Germany and Japan in particular. Then we went back with a Marshall Plan. We completely rebuilt both countries. We gave them brand new steel mills that we literally couldn't compete with because ours were dilapidated at the time. And then we paid the price for it, started buying their steel, and they started pouring it on the market because they were socialists and they did it through their government. And so we got cheaper steel from better factories that we built for the enemy that we defeated. I mean, give me a break. Does anybody ever think about this stuff?
Well, we have a president who accepts the notion of American exceptionalism.
Yeah.
We had a president who went around and apologized for us. Now, you tell me.
And by the way, let me ask you, who loved the one that apologized for us?
I mean, who loved Obama?
Yeah, in Europe.
The socialists loved him.
Everybody in Europe. Who hates the one who's promoting America?
Right.
Everybody
Socialists.
in Europe. I mean, it's just incredible.
So when you look at this stuff, when you look at this long list of things that are moving in the right direction,
mm-hmm.
they have no hope but to create a dystopian future out of it. This is the reason I believe, Chuck, this is the driving force behind the Green New Deal. Because the president is not accepting climate change as a real science, which he should not.
Right.
And because of that, the only thing that they can come up with that they can say is wrong, because as we know, politicians don't run on what's good. They run on what's bad.
What's the Green New Deal about? I can tell you exactly what its focus is about, what its attack is about, what the point of the spear of the Green New Deal is about.
Destroy capitalism.
Destroy capitalism. Exactly right. That's what it's about. It's the opposite of socialism. And so give me a break. If you can't see this, that is so simple to me.
So we can't run against Donald Trump's record. If you're the Democrats, you cannot run against his record.
Well, they won't even expose his record.
But you can't run against it.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to create a new problem. So the reason that all these lunatics, everybody running for president on Democratic tickets supports the Green New Deal. No one other than AOC, who is just naive, no one running thinks it's possible. Bernie Sanders is not stupid enough to think that that is possible. Neither is Kamala Harris stupid enough to think that we could spend $100 trillion on a climate change bill. And just to put that in perspective, folks, that's almost 6 times our gross domestic product. It's more than the gross domestic product of the whole planet.
Money
if we
doesn't
count
mean anything to them. Ideas are the thing. It's my idea. I don't care how much it costs.
But imagine, we'd have to confiscate every penny from every nation in the world to pay for it. And once we get this new Green Deal, there are 7.7 billion people on this planet. We happen to be 340 million of them. Okay, so that's a fraction of the population. Less than 5% of the population.
Well, they're asking to give up our cars. Someone, Ed Randell, of all people, pointed this out. Ed Randell, the ex-governor of Pennsylvania, which I was shocked to hear come out of his mouth. He said, do people realize that electric cars are run on the energy from all the factories, the coals, and everything else? He said, where do we get this energy? It doesn't just appear. It's not lightning strikes that come out of the air. We have to manufacture the energy to run these things.
Well, remember, under the AOC deal, we will invent new technology that will replace all coal-fired and gas-fired power.
Well, I look forward to the next 12 years of seeing exactly what that's going to be.
Well,
it's not going to be wind. We know that.
You don't understand.
It's not going to be the sun. We know that.
Here's why you don't understand, Chuck.
Why is that, Mark?
Because AOC said we need to start inventing things that haven't been invented before.
Oh, well, cool. I don't disagree with that.
Because up until now, we've been inventing things that have already been invented.
It's insane. It is absolutely insane. Maybe she's onto something. Who knows? She's been watching all those, movies that come out of Hollywood where you touch something, it lights up and tells you everything that you need to do. It's like Superman in the ice cave. It's insane, but they believe it. So what are you going to do?
What they have to do is look at where this thing is shaping up. Everything is going to shape up around healthcare and the Green New Deal. Mm-hmm. Because people are concerned about healthcare.
Well, what about all these people on Medicare who are paying for it? And then you load it up with people who aren't paying for it. Now who's going to pay for it?
Think about when you were first pushed on the Medicare.
Oh, please don't tell me. I love all these people who say everybody that's on Medicare loves it. Well, I got news for you. I don't love it.
Your doctor called you and fired you.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's exactly right. Yep, I had a local doctor right here in Marble Falls who said, I am not treating Medicare patients anymore, and you're one of them. Bye-bye.
Your doctor fired you because your doctor didn't want to work for the money that Medicare was paying.
Yeah.
And the length of time it takes to get paid, because it takes a doctor about 120 days to even get paid when they see a Medicare patient. So I have you come into my clinic.
$7 for every patient or something crazy.
Right. So you come in my clinic. I get paid a minimum amount of money to see you, which is why I only spend 6 minutes with you.
And why I spent 12 years in college or university or whatever.
Right. And now it's going to take me 120 days plus just to get paid for seeing you today. Why do I want to do that?
Yeah.
And when we look at Medicaid, which is even worse, you can't find a Medicaid doctor.
Both are going broke.
You remember that my wife and I used to take foster children into our home.
Yes.
Those foster children, when we would get them, would all be on Medicaid.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know that we used to take them to our doctor? We would take these foster kids to our own doctor and pay to see these kids looked at. And the reason was we couldn't find a doctor in Metro Detroit who would see them. And on the rare occasion that my wife actually found a doctor who would take the Medicaid, it was in a neighborhood that I wouldn't want her to be in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was somewhere in the middle of a war zone in Detroit is where there was a doctor who takes Medicaid.
Mm-hmm.
Now, imagine we decide, let's put 340 million people on that system. We can't even, right, we can't even cope with indigent children that are in foster care. We can't even give them health care. But we're going to take the exact same system and we're going to put 340 million people in.
That's a very interesting perspective that you and I have never discussed before. I've never heard this.
As far as the foster kids?
Yeah, I mean, I knew about the foster care, but I didn't know about the doctors.
It was horrible.
Mm-hmm.
So Sal would take them to our doctors and just pay out of her pocket to get these kids seen because it was impossible to get them health care. Same with dentists. We could not get them dental care. So we would just go to see Jim McCullough, our dentist, who you know, and we would pay him. And it was the only way we could get these kids taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
Absolute tragedy. And what is it the Democrats are telling you? We have to take care of children. The Trump administration hates children. They put children in cages at the Trump administration.
You know, this is still going on today. We know that Trump got rid of that.
And Obama was the one who did it.
All the pictures and everything from the Obama administration. And the media won't let you know that. They won't tell you that. They just show the pictures of kids in cages, and it's from the Obama era.
Well, I'm here to tell you from a front row seat, Medicaid doesn't work. And trying to put everyone on that system, you think that system's overwhelmed now, it will crush it. Think about doctors that you know, doctors I know right now who have already gotten out of medicine.
Oh my gosh, I have more than one friend.
So do I. They've gotten out.
I'm not doing this anymore. Yeah.
Right. Because these are smart guys who know how to do other things.
Mm-hmm. But then Michael Moore goes to Cuba and said, what a great system.
Michael Moore should leave Michigan.
Michael Moore didn't go to the doctor in Cuba. He just went to hospitals and things. And I mean, it's oh my gosh, Mark, it's so frustrating.
Now, Chuck, so Michael Horowitz, who is the Inspector General, is going to be releasing a report.
Someplace. We have no idea what he even looks like. Maybe that's how it should be. I don't know.
He's going to be releasing a report next month looking into the other side of the Russian collusion and the FISA warrants. Now, I was getting to a point earlier, and that is the Democrats are screaming on camera that the Mueller report needs to be submitted unredacted, but quietly they are screaming that all of the information on the FISA warrants needs to be hidden, if not redacted, but hidden and not shown to the public, because that might disclose secret ways that we acquire intelligence.
Well, it will disclose ways we have intelligence when you have corrupt intelligence people and corrupt FBI leadership and all this kind of stuff. I mean, I thought it was very interesting when Corsi was on, and you and I both tried to defend the mainstream of the FBI. And he said, no, don't do that. These guys were after me too. Well, they were after him because, you know, their leadership.
They were told to be.
The leadership had a harness on him and told him to go get him.
I still defend the men and women on the street.
Yeah, so do I.
I know these people, many of them, and these are good, hardworking people that want to enforce the law. But they have corrupt bosses. And you do what your boss tells you.
I must tell you, the liberal progressives will corrupt anything they touch. I don't care what it is. They will corrupt it.
So you look at Jerry Nadler. Jerry Nadler is one of the big people that's out in front demanding the unredacted version of the Mueller report, right? Who in Congress was demanding that they redact the Kenneth Starr report on Bill Clinton?
Well, the same people, but
that's Jerry Nadler.
And by the way, I said the same people, and by the way, then they passed a rule that you could never do this again, that there were certain people that had to be protected. And they're now going against the very rule they passed.
And it's not just Congress passed the rule. It's the people who are going after it are the people who pass the rule.
Yeah, right.
And this is what's frustrating me is the hypocrisy amongst these. And don't think hypocrisy is something that is just owned by the Democrats. Because if you want to, no, because we can look we can go look across the aisle at Romney.
What is up with Mitt Romney? I mean, talk about disappointment. My gosh. Now, I knew that Mitt Romney wasn't a conservative. I understood that when he was running for president. But he was still the better guy, I thought. But good Lord, how corrupted has he become, and why? Is it just a personal vendetta because he doesn't like Trump? I mean, what is that? That he, no matter what Trump says, he's going to go against it with 3 or 4 others in the Senate? I mean, it's...
And he was more than willing to use Trump to get elected to the Senate.
Yeah, and Trump helped him. But, you know, it's interesting. Murkowski, Collins, I mean, you can just go down and name the ones and list them out. And Johnson in Ohio, I mean, you can just name them. You know who they are before they ever vote. And now Mitt Romney has joined that cabal of anti-Trumpers in the Senate. Which, by the way, I think Mitch McConnell is one of those people, too.
Romney's a disappointment in as much as
Mitch McConnell's only interested in getting the judiciary fixed up because it helps him and helps the Republican Party. But he's not interested in anything else Trump wants to do.
Romney's a disappointment. I mean, again, I hate the hypocrisy. You are a hypocrite when you embrace the president to get elected and then you turn on him. That to me is no different than Bernie Sanders attacking millionaires and being a millionaire. Mm-hmm. And I don't mind Bernie being a millionaire. I just mind him being a hypocrite. Mm-hmm. I don't even mind Romney being against the president, but don't use him to get elected.
Well, I mean, this is an interesting game that goes on in Washington, D.C. It represents America and is absolutely un-American. It's amazing.
These people
just amazing.
Are overwhelmed by something called cognitive dissonance.
And money.
But if you think of cognitive dissonance, it's that ability to hold 2 conflicting opinions in your brain at the same time. Mm-hmm. But you come up with a method, you come up with a story that you tell yourself that justifies it. And that's what they're doing here. It's okay for me to have money because I'm me. I earned it because I wrote a book, and writing a book is legitimate money. But being in business is illegitimate money. It's me convincing me of my moral superiority.
It seems like government, who is supported by the private sector, without them, government wouldn't exist because there'd be no money, is in constant competition with the private sector. I'm not sure. I can't say that on the Republican side, but I can certainly say it on the Democrat side, because progressive socialism is all about statism and the government running everything. Like when Maxine Waters almost said, we're going to take over the oil industry. They want to take over every industry. They want to regulate it. They want to do it the way they think is right to do it, because the private sector has no ideas that are worthy. And the private sector is not worthy on any level when it comes to government versus private sector. And yet, without the private sector, government would not exist because there wouldn't be any money for them.
I'd like to introduce you to a new type of podcast. And by new, I mean there's never been anything like this before, not in terms of scope or ambition. The show's called Living Beyond 120. Science proved that lifespan could exceed 120 years back in the 1960s. And the Bible first mentioned living to 120 years 6,000 years ago in the book of Genesis. But the question is, how do we get there? Living Beyond 120 tries to answer this question. The show is an exploration into human longevity and what it will take for us to live longer, healthier lives, featuring interviews with some of the most respected minds in longevity science and tackling big subjects like how the medical system, big pharma, and maybe even our own government don't want you to live longer. Living Beyond 120. It's hosted by me and my co-host, medical expert, Dr. Jeffrey Gladden. You'll find the show on iTunes, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast directory, and you can also listen to it at the website livingbeyond120.com. Now, tell me one service that government provides that they can provide better than the private sector.
I don't know of a single thing except defense of the country. And I'm not sure that the private sector couldn't do that if they were turned loose and had the money that government had. And on top of that, the private sector, frankly, provides airplanes, ships, whatever is commissioned by the government anyway. The private sector builds it.
So can you think of anything? They can't provide roads better because private industry can build roads better.
No, I can't. I mean, it's
education. They can't provide education better.
God, education is just a mess ever since Carter got. Well, Carter did that. I mean, the states had their rights and their education, our education. I remember when I first moved to California in the 70s, California was among the top states in the union, if not the world, in educating kids. Palos Verdes, I think, had, it wasn't Palos Verdes, what was it? Oh, well, wherever it was on the right out of Santa Monica. I just can't think of the name of it right now. But they were like the number one high schools and junior high schools that everybody wanted to go to. Literally, when Carter turned it over to the Department of Education and it became government control, California went in a ditch. They just, now their school system sucks along with the rest of the country unless it's some kind of special school set up by the people in a community or whatever it is. But public education stinks right now. It's horrible. And it goes back to when Carter turned it over to the Department of Education and became a government entity. They control everything.
Yeah, if schools were so great, then private schools wouldn't be such a booming business.
And by the way, I've been through the private school system with several of my children, and they're not so hot either.
But they tend to be better than the public schools.
They are better than the public. Well, they're better than the public system is now, but they weren't so hot in California when I was a parent. And the teachers were kind of outliers. They weren't mainstream teachers. I dated a teacher for a long time who became a principal. Mm-hmm. And she was an awesome teacher,
great person.
And a great person. But she was definitely an anomaly in that whole system.
It's just frustrating. Colorado right now, has just passed a new law called the red flag law.
What is that? You're not allowed to carry a red flag anywhere?
The red flag law is allowing for firearms to be seized from people determined to pose a danger. Now, I want you to follow me here. Under the preponderance of the evidence. Now, this is important. This is a legal term.
Preponderance of the evidence. Sounds very legal.
So we have two court systems in America. We have a criminal court and a civil court. Mm-hmm. In a criminal court, you have to find someone guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Okay? Mm-hmm. So the bar is fairly high.
Civil court, the bar is not so high.
Now, in a civil court, so let's say I'm suing you because you ran my dog over, then we have what's called the preponderance of the evidence, which means, well, if I look at everything that Mr. Woolery said and I look at everything Mr. Young said, does the scales tilt more than 50% in one direction or the other? So very circumstantial evidence can make the difference, okay? But you can't do that in a criminal trial because you're taking away someone's freedom. They have now passed this law in Colorado that says the civil standard of a preponderance of the evidence can be used to take your guns away. So that means, this Chuck Woolery, I think he's a little crazy. I don't know. I don't trust him with guns. What do you think? I mean, I heard him on a podcast. He sounds kind of like a right-wing nut. So now you don't need any evidence. Doesn't matter that Chuck Woolery's never committed a crime in his life. Doesn't matter he's never done anything with a firearm to ever be warranted at any time in his life. I don't trust him. What do you think? Do you trust him? I don't think I trust him either. This is what they're doing. And because of this, they can seize your gun without a court hearing. Then they can have a court hearing, and the judge can extend you losing your guns for another 364 days. And you can only retrieve them. Now, check this out. You can only retrieve them by demonstrating that you are sane with clear and convincing evidence. Now, tell me how would you prove to me you're sane with clear and convincing evidence? How do you prove a negative?
No, you can't.
Right. Prove to me that you don't have a mental instability.
Mm-hmm.
So this is basically guilty until proven innocent to get your weapon back. I can take it from you because I think you're nuts, and you're going to remain guilty until you can prove yourself innocent if you want your Second Amendment constitutional rights restored in Colorado. This is dangerous.
You know, it's interesting, Mark, that I grew up in northeastern Kentucky, which is, well, noted to be pretty wild and woolly, close to Hazard and Harlem, and even though I wasn't right quite there, but I was fairly close. And my dad carried a gun all the time. He was in sales on the road. He was almost shot several times. But we grew up hunting. I hunted all my life. My father hunted all his life. His dad did, and on and on and on. And we used weapons to feed ourselves a lot of times. Now, a lot of people may laugh at that, but quite frankly, I had wild game at my table in eastern Kentucky probably 3 to 4 days a week. Either rabbits, squirrels, fish, whatever it was. We always had wild game because it was cheaper, and we hunted. Now, you change that to an urban area where no one hunts, no one understands it, they don't like it, they don't like guns, they don't like the feel of them, they don't like the look of them, and criminals use them to kill people. So now it's not that you need guns to go out and hunt something, that those days are coming to an end. But now you need guns to protect yourself from criminals that want to kill you or hold you up or whatever, invade your home or whatever it is. And I just don't think that urban America can get their head around that, whether they feel so safe that they just don't need it, or they feel like they can call the police and they'll come to them. But it's now become a point where it is really for your safety that you own a firearm so you can protect yourself.
The Supreme Court has ruled on more than one occasion that it is not the responsibility of the police department and law enforcement to keep you safe. And if you think about it, there's 340 million people in America. There's 900,000 cops. There can't be a cop parked out front your door 24 hours a day.
Right.
It's not their job to keep you safe. It is your job to keep you safe.
Well, it's your job to keep you and your family safe at all possible, and most people have no idea how to do that, nor do they want to. And a lot of people don't think they need to until, what does it say? When a liberal becomes a conservative, it's when they're walking through Central Park and they get raped or they get held up or they get shot, and then all of a sudden they become very conservative.
Or apparently they make $1 million and they become capitalists.
Yeah, right. But I mean, it's like, we need a stoplight at the intersection. We have enough accidents. We'll finally put one there. I don't even know how to address that, frankly.
The left-wing media will not report the true statistics.
No, they won't on anything.
They will report that there's a school shooting, but they won't report on the 600,000 to 1.2 million crimes that are prevented every year by a legally armed citizen.
It's funny. When you get into this thing that happened in Florida, this school shooting, they had this kid dead to rights. They knew who he was. They knew what he was. I'm not sure they knew that he was going to shoot up the school or not, but boy, he had everything going for him as to being a major suspect, and they just didn't pay any attention to it.
They've been to his home 37 times.
I mean, give me a break. And yet they're going to blame it's gun violence. Well, guns have to have a finger on the trigger in order to be violent.
So I've told you this before, but I'll share this. So I was in the city of Detroit in a rough area, pulled into a gas station at 11 o'clock at night to get gas. I'm pumping gas, and two guys dressed in some, very street kind of clothes, started heading toward me very rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
And as they were approaching me, I pulled my jacket back to reveal a very large, shiny 9mm sitting on a hip holster. I didn't pull the gun out. I just pulled my jacket back and put it behind the weapon. The two people approaching me stopped dead in their tracks, and they both put their hands up in the air as if they were being held up. They put their hands up, they looked at me, they nodded, they put their eyes down, they turned around, and they walked back behind the gas station. Now, did I prevent a crime from happening?
Yeah, probably.
Was it reported? No. Who was I going to report it to? Mm-hmm. This is what happens with people carrying legal firearms every day across this country.
The point is the government doesn't trust the people with firearms. The founding fathers knew this. It's been proven over and over again. The minute the government wants to take over and take away your liberty, they take away your firearms first. They did it in Germany. They do it every time. It never fails. Well, do people in Venezuela have firearms?
Oh, no.
Of course not. So once you lose your ability to protect yourself, not only against the government in everyday life, then you are absolutely vulnerable. And the founding fathers understood that. And government people don't like it. They don't like to be held accountable. They don't like to be not have authority over you. It's a lack of tyranny. They want tyranny, and we want liberty. And that's really what it all finally boils down to. And
Ben
the founding
Franklin
fathers gave us liberty, and the government is constantly trying to take it away from us.
Ben Franklin said, any government that does not trust its people with guns is a government that cannot be trusted.
Exactly right. I agree with that 100%. Of course, he was an old white guy. He didn't own any slaves, though.
He didn't.
No, he was just white.
He was white, and that is a problem.
What is that all about, by the way? Have you ever noticed? I mean, this is coming along in the last year, 6 months, whatever.
But have you noticed, though, the people who are the most outspoken against white males are white people?
Yeah, it's like I need to protect myself, so I agree with you.
It's like, why are these white people coming out attacking people for being white?
or apologizing for it as if you could do anything about it or had anything to do with it.
It's insane because you and I have been, people will argue that you and I have been given privileges by the fact that we were white. And I'm not even going to disagree with that. Okay, so maybe there was a benefit.
Boy, I'd love to show
being
you
white.
I'd love to show you absolute photographs of my my ancestors to see how much privilege we had.
Well, let's assume
it's a joke.
Let's assume for a minute that there was a benefit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is there a benefit to being born with a high IQ?
Well, sure there is. It's also a benefit if you're in the NBA being tall.
And would you say that being 7 feet tall in the NBA or having a high IQ is probably a bigger benefit than your skin color? I would say that is probably the case. So are we going to start, once we get through with the white people, are we going to start having IQ privilege where you were benefited because you were smarter?
Yeah, I know.
And you were taller? What about you were handsomer? What about if you were more handsome?
A handsome tax.
Well,
who determines that? Is that men for women? Another board of men looking and saying, she's a little too beautiful. Let's tax her.
Well,
and he's a little too handsome by a bunch of women. No, I don't think that's not too. And the people who judge you will be really ugly people.
Okay, let's just go to your career for a minute. You got the Hollywood.
Please don't put me in the middle of this.
No, but what I'm saying, you got the Hollywood.
Yeah.
And you were 2 weeks in Hollywood, and you have a couple of casting directors looking at you.
Right.
Saying, wait a minute, I think he's the guy. And they decide that you look like Superman.
Right.
Okay. Now, you didn't do anything. Maybe you were in good condition, but facially, You didn't do anything to look like Superman. You were born this way.
They're watching a bunch of people rehearse a show that I had nothing to do with.
So weren't you given an unfair handsome advantage? And I'm not kidding you here for a minute. You could go to this extreme.
Yeah, I don't know.
You could take this to this extreme.
Oh, that's true. I believe you could take anything to an extreme, which is basically what progressives do. They always take it to the extreme.
You could say somebody has a good looks advantage. They have an IQ advantage. There's no difference between saying somebody's handsome or smarter than saying their skin color.
One of the most interesting things to me that's taking place, a dynamic that's happening, is how black people who are on the left are like Candace Owens. Candace Owens is brilliant. She just nailed Jerry Nadler, I thought. I mean, she just threw a grenade right in the mouth, right back at him. And all of the black people came along and started criticizing her because she's brilliant, because she's very smart, and she wouldn't take any of their crap. And this happens. I see this happening all the time. That I guess it's just because they're conservative. But if you're conservative and you're black, then you're not black anymore. I mean,
you're the wrong black.
What?
You're the wrong black. Well, think about Peter Thiel, though.
You're the wrong white just by the fact that you're white.
But look what happened to Peter Thiel. Now, Peter Thiel was the co-founder of PayPal. Mm-hmm. He's a billionaire. Mm-hmm. He happens to be a gay white male. Mm-hmm. And Peter spoke on behalf of the president of the RNC. And Out Magazine said that he is no longer a gay man.
It's just nuts. The racket they have going on.
How can giving a political speech take away your sexual preference? How did that happen?
Well, of course it doesn't any more than makes you less black or less white or less what. I mean, it's just nuts.
And why did the homophobic Donald Trump, because remember, he's a homophobe.
He's everything.
He's every phobe out there. Why did homophobic Donald Trump allow gay Peter Thiel to speak on his behalf? I think the president knew that if I can get him to speak, his gayness will be stamped out. I just need him to speak on my behalf, and I will crush his gayness and take it away from him. Mm-hmm. Julian Assange is in handcuffs.
Okay, here's the deal on Julian Assange as far as I'm concerned. I don't think Julian Assange is a good guy. Julian Assange gave away a lot of our intel and set that up with what's his name that became a woman, the transvestite who.
Yes, Chelsea Manning.
Chelsea Manning, who was Sam Manning or something before. But anyway, he conspired to do these things, and certainly not in the best interests of America. So I have a real problem with him. I don't care if he helped defeat Hillary Clinton, because I don't think he had anything to do with defeating Hillary Clinton. But of course, the left will say he did. But I think this guy needs to be held accountable. Personally, I really do.
So here's what I think on Assange, because he's
now they're going to go. And by the way, not to interrupt, but I'm interrupting. He didn't do anything worse than the Pentagon Papers. He didn't do anything worse than other journalists, but they won't handle him like a journalist. And journalists will not come to his defense. But I'm not going to come to his defense because I think he subverted America.
Here's the issue. This guy I don't think anybody, not even Mueller, has been able to go from hero to zero as much as this guy does.
Boy, no kidding.
So
he's the hero of the left until,
right.
Nails came out.
So here's what I think. If Assange, if Chelsea Manning stole or did the hacks and provided the information to him, and he made it available.
Obviously, he did that.
I agree.
Now, whether he was set up by Assange to do it, I don't know. But
That's my point. If Assange was a part of the hack, mm-hmm. or if Assange encouraged him to hack, mm-hmm. then I would say Assange is complicit. He is part of a crime.
Right.
If Manning did nothing more than go to Assange and say, I have these secrets, and Assange published them, then he's actually done nothing more than the New York Times has done God knows how many times.
Exactly. That's my point.
So for me, I'm reserving judgment
Until he's judged.
until the investigation really shows did he commit the crime or did he publish the fruit of the crime? Because if he only published the fruit of the crime, then he's no different than many other outlets.
I don't disagree.
So I think that one's still left. Last thing I'm going to hit you with is CBS television. So CBS has an online service where you can watch other programs, that are adjacent to the network programs.
Yeah.
And they have a program called The Good Wife.
Yeah.
They have a spinoff on CBS All Access, which is called The Good Life.
Mm-hmm.
And in this Good Life, the character played by Christine Baranski is given the task of bringing down President Trump. In the creation of this show, the key words that they were using in the show was president, one word, Trump, another word, assassination, another word, Mar-a-Lago, and destroy.
I'm afraid for his safety. I really am. All this talk about him being a fascist, being a bigot, being all this. I mean, they're really setting the stage for someone to assassinate him. And I am truly concerned about the left setting up his assassination and also feeling vindicated doing it.
CBS, the network of Lucille Ball, the network of Walter Cronkite, now creating programming suggesting the assassination of the president is apparently, if not a good idea, at least good entertainment.
Right.
I'm speechless on that. I don't even know what to say about that.
I don't either. I mean, you and I both, I mean, I'm older than you are by a pretty good leap, but I've never seen anything like this in my lifetime. And I know you haven't. But things are accepted by the left, by a lot of Americans that are just so atrocious that it's hard to explain. It's frustrating to watch, and I'm not sure what the cure is for it. I really don't know.
We need to guard ourselves against the whole boiling frog theory.
You know what? You're exactly right. I've used that many times as an example. And people are boiling and don't even know it. And it's really sad to watch.
Because we watch our values and we watch our morals deteriorate, but it moves along at a steady pace. And what was unacceptable last week is now starting. I mean, think about how unacceptable the word socialism was only a few years ago.
Well, listen, think about it. What it was when Joe the plumber. Just basic. I mean, it wasn't even outward. It was just when Obama said something.
Only 10 years ago.
10 years ago, and Joe the plumber said, well, that sounds like socialism, and they destroyed this guy over that. Now, they're all socialists. Of course, they don't claim they are, like Nancy Pelosi, but they are. And then Bernie comes along and said, well, I'm not just a socialist. I'm a democratic socialist, whatever the crap that means. It doesn't mean anything.
If you go to the website of the Democratic Socialist Party, because there's a separate party called Democratic Socialist, if you go there, which I have done, and if you read their planks, their platform is literally
platform.
It's right out of the Marx Engel reader.
Of course, yeah. And by the way, folks, this has been going on since the 1920s. There were two things that are really interesting when you look back at the 1920s and 1930s. That were very acceptable in this country. One was Nazism. Nazis were accepted all over New York. They had parades and rooms full of, auditoriums full of people with Heil Hitler and everything else. That went on for a long, long time. That was not of the right. That was of the left, except there were a few on the right that thought it was a good idea. But Marxism has been around, since the 20s. I mean, go watch the movie Reds sometime, and you'll get an idea of how long it's been fomenting in this country and how long they've been after it. I still think of Nikita Khrushchev walking around the cornfields in Iowa with the secretary. I can't think of his name right now, but he was Secretary of the Interior. And he said something to this guy, and he said, we're going to take over America. And the guy looked at him and said, that's not going to happen because I'm going to fight you everywhere. And Nikita Khrushchev, basically, I'm paraphrasing, looked at him and said, we will pick you like low-hanging fruit. You'll have no idea that it's happened when it happens. And this happened back in the 50s. This is exactly what's going on. They have always considered us low-hanging fruit because we're a free nation. We allow any kind of speech, which is fine. But as I said before, they use freedom to attack freedom. They use the Constitution to attack the Constitution. And they will do anything in their power to take over our government and make it compliant to their political ideology. And they're on their way. And by the way, a complicit group with this is basic Islamists. These Islamists who are in our government are right in lockstep with socialists. And if you don't believe that, wait and see. I guarantee you that's true, because the fundamental Islamists are nothing but a political ideology wrapped in a religion. But it's basically political more than anything else. It has to do with tyranny. It has to do with controlling people, what they think, what they do, what they can do. And it's right in lockstep with Democrats, and that's why they're all on the Democrat side.
The socialists have been patient. They've been patient. They
until lately, and we're going to find out whether they've overstepped or not.
They followed Cloward and Piven.
Absolutely. Boy, if people haven't read Cloward and Piven.
And it has taken time.
Saul
Alinsky, they have taken over the education. They have taken over the universities.
These are people right out of Columbia University, where the School for Political Correctness came from Frankfurt and located in Columbia. That's Cloward and Piven. Saul Alinsky's right out of Chicago. And
they knew they had to capture the youth, and they had to capture the minds. Yeah. And they've been patient, but their patience has worn thin now. And they see this. Yes, they see
they're early.
I think they're early too, but their patience has worn thin. And it's because they have a lot of youth in the movement, people like an AOC, which is very impatient.
By Marxists right out of college. They've graduated them all from universities.
Right.
Who not taught, they've been indoctrinated.
Who know nothing but this.
Mm-hmm.
And they feel morally justified. And their patience have worn thin, and they are now going to make a full court press into fundamentally transforming America into France.
As Barack Obama promised.
Or as I said,
and Hillary Clinton promised. I mean, when you connect these two, I'll give you an interesting connection between Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton did her college thesis on Saul Alinsky. Barack Obama used to teach Saul Alinsky all the principles of Saul Alinsky, Rules for Radicals. This is what we're up against, folks. And
Frank Marshall Davis.
Yeah, I mean, people just don't get it. And that's frustrating to me. I wish they could get the simplicity of just that. But most people have no idea who Saul Alinsky is or what he was all about. Trust me, Saul Alinsky was an anti-American. He was a Marxist, a communist. And these people revered him, studied him, and he was their hero. So you can only figure where this is going to go if you understand what the roots of their ideology is.
Right. And another one of those radicals was Frank Marshall Davis,
right,
who acted as the mentor for young Barack Obama.
He was a communist. And by the way, they keep talking about the Pete Buttigieg or whatever the hell you pronounce his last name. Take a look at what his dad was. His father was a Marxist professor at Notre Dame University. There's no question. So does that fruit fall far from the tree, or is he just as Marxist as his dad is? Because he revered his father. I don't blame him for that. But his dad was a Marxist. But nobody wants to talk about that.
No, because he's Mayor Pete and he's gay.
Yeah, right.
So because he's gay, he gets a pass. It's a pass. Well, Chuck, I want everybody to remember that you can now get Blunt Force Truth at the Podcast One app or at iTunes. So if you don't have Podcast One on your phone, actually, if you get the app, there's lots of other great podcasts, including our what I will call is our sister podcast, Laura Ingram, who is going to be a guest on this show, I believe, next week.
Oh, good.
Also, go to bluntforcetruth.com to get your regular news, get your Blunt Force Truth paraphernalia, and cups and shirts and all those wonderful things. And again, I want to welcome one of our new supporters, Blue Emu, to the podcast. And we haven't even started doing commercials for them yet, but we are grateful that they've joined up with us.
Yes, we are. Thanks, everybody, for joining us here on Blunt Force Truth, and we'll see you next time.